Welcome to AZ-802, Practice Exam Hybrid Windows Server Management Deep Dive, Set 4. This focus session includes 36 original questions on Windows Admin Center, PowerShell remoting, just enough administration, Open SSH, remote desktop, Azure Arc, machine configuration, virtual machine extensions, Azure Update Manager, and automation runbooks. I will read each hybrid management scenario and the answer choices. After the choices, you will hear "lock in your answer." Then the video pauses for a silent 3-second countdown. Pause the video if you need more time. After the countdown, I will reveal the correct answer, explain the deciding boundary or execution path, and share one exam clue you can transfer to another scenario. Question 1 of 36. Your organization needs a browser-based console so 8 administrators can manage 50 Windows servers located on a private network. No inbound ports may be opened on the target servers, and administrators must not install client software on their workstations. Which Windows Admin Center deployment and authorization design should you use? Option A. Deploy Windows Admin Center in gateway mode on a dedicated server, bind a trusted TLS certificate, grant the administrator's gateway access, and configure per node WinRM credentials separately. Option B. Install Windows Admin Center in desktop mode on each administrator workstation and connect directly to the target servers. Option C. Add every target server to the local administrators group of the Windows Admin Center gateway server. Option D. Enable the Windows Admin Center extension for each server inside the Azure portal and assign Azure Arc roles. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Deploy Windows Admin Center in gateway mode on a dedicated server, bind a trusted TLS certificate, grant the administrator's gateway access, and configure per node WinRM credentials separately. Gateway mode centralizes browser access while keeping target servers private. A trusted certificate secures the gateway. Gateway access controls who reaches the console. Separate node credentials and WinRM handle actual server management without exposing targets directly. Gateway mode centralizes browser access, but target authorization remains separate. Validate the gateway, WinRM path, and node credentials as distinct boundaries. Question 2 of 36. You must perform full guest operating system administration on an Azure virtual machine from the Azure portal without opening RDP or installing any agent beyond the standard Azure extensions. Which management option should you configure? Option A. Use Azure Portal VM blade actions such as run command or serial console. Option B. Enable Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal. Ensure the Arc or Azure VM extension prerequisites are met, and connect through the portal blade. Option C. Deploy a Windows Admin Center gateway inside the same VNet and open inbound port 443 on the VM. Option D. Install the Windows Admin Center desktop application on a jump host and use Azure Bastion to reach it. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Enable Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal. Ensure the Arc or Azure VM extension prerequisites are met, and connect through the portal blade. Windows Admin Center inside the Azure portal provides browser-based guest OS management for Azure VMs when the required extension and connectivity prerequisites are satisfied. Portal control plane actions alone do not expose the full guest OS tools. Azure portal control plane actions do not equal guest administration. Windows Admin Center integration adds guest tools only after its extension and connectivity prerequisites succeed. Question 3 of 36. Security policy prohibits granting local administrator rights on managed servers. You must still allow a help desk team to perform delegated tasks through Windows Admin Center without creating a broad administrative backdoor. Which authorization design should you implement? Option A. Add the help desk users to the local administrators group on the Windows Admin Center gateway. Option B. Grant the help desk group membership in every target server's local administrators group. Option C. Configure WAC role-based access with JEA-backed node roles. Grant gateway sign-in rights separately and map the group to the least privilege role capability. Option D. Enable Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal and assign contributor role at the subscription scope. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Configure WAC role-based access with JEA-backed node roles, grant gateway sign-in rights separately, and map the group to the least privilege role capability. Gateway sign-in, node role assignment, and JEA role capabilities are distinct authorization layers. This combination satisfies the no broad admin requirement while enabling delegated WAC tasks. Least privilege Windows Admin Center delegation separates gateway sign-in from node authorization, using JEA-backed roles instead of broad local administrator membership. Question 4 of 36. After installing a Windows Admin Center gateway, the console opens successfully, but one managed server shows a connection error while the other 49 servers connect normally. Which troubleshooting action should you take first? Option A. Reinstall the Windows Admin Center gateway on a different server. Option B. Open inbound TCP 443 on every target server's Windows firewall. Option C. Add the gateway server computer account to the domain admins group. Option D. Verify WinRM listener status, name resolution, credential delegation, and certificate trust on the failing target. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Verify WinRM listener status, name resolution, credential delegation, and certificate trust on the failing target. A single node failure points to a per-target reachability or authentication issue, not the gateway installation. Checking WinRM, DNS, delegation, and trust on that node isolates the root cause without unnecessary gateway changes. Successful connections to 49 servers prove the gateway is healthy. Isolate the single failure to the target WinRM path. Question 5 of 36. You need to enable PowerShell remoting from management workstations to domain-joined Windows servers while ensuring Kerberos authentication is used and no NTLM fallback occurs. Which configuration ensures that the remoting sessions use Kerberos and fail rather than fall back to NTLM? Option A. Run Enable PS Remoting, verify the server SPNs, connect by DNS hostname, and specify Kerberos as the authentication mechanism. Option B. Connect by IP address, add each server to trusted hosts, and use Negotiate authentication. Option C. Create HTTPS WinRM listeners with self-signed certificates and use basic authentication. Option D. Connect by DNS hostname with Negotiate authentication after disabling Kerberos on the servers. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Run Enable PS Remoting. Verify the server SPNs, connect by DNS hostname, and specify Kerberos as the authentication mechanism. Enable PS Remoting prepares WinRM and firewall roles, but Kerberos depends on a resolvable hostname and valid SPN. Explicit Kerberos authentication makes the session fail instead of falling back to NTLM. Kerberos remoting requires a resolvable hostname and valid SPN. Specifying Kerberos prevents silent NTLM fallback when that identity path is broken. Question 6 of 36. From a PowerShell session on Server A, an approved administrator identity must access a file share on Server B. Credential delegation is prohibited, and Server B is in a different Kerberos realm. Which two approaches can satisfy the second hop requirement without enabling credential delegation? Option A. Reuse the credential supplied to invoke command for Server A without passing another credential inside the remote script block. Option B. Pass an explicit approved credential inside the Server A session when creating the connection to Server B. Option C. Enable Cred SSP on the client and Server A, then reconnect with Cred SSP authentication. Option D. Use a constrained session configuration on Server A that runs under an approved identity already authorized to the Server B share. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are B and D. Option B. Pass an explicit approved credential inside the Server A session when creating the connection to Server B. Option D. Use a constrained session configuration on Server A that runs under an approved identity already authorized to the Server B share. Without delegation, the first hop session cannot reuse the caller credential on Server B. Valid alternatives are supplying a fresh, approved credential inside the session, or executing through a Server A session configuration that already runs under an identity authorized to the share. Second hop identity must be supplied explicitly inside the session or pre-placed on the first hop host when delegation is forbidden. Question 7 of 36. Help desk staff must run only get DNS server resource record and resolve DNS name against domain controllers without local administrator rights or full remote PowerShell access. Which two actions create a JEA endpoint that satisfies the requirement while preserving auditability? Option A. Create a role capability file whose visible cmdlets entries expose the two DNS commands and approved parameters. Option B. Run set execution policy remote signed on every domain controller. Option C. Register a JEA session configuration that maps the help desk group to the role capability and specifies a protected transcript directory. Option D. Add the help desk users to the domain admins group with a time-bound membership. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A and C. Option A. Create a role capability file whose visible cmdlets entries expose the two DNS commands and approved parameters. Option C. Register a JEA session configuration that maps the help desk group to the role capability and specifies a protected transcript directory. JEA needs a role capability that exposes only approved cmdlets and a registered session configuration that maps the operator group to that capability. A protected transcript directory preserves command-level audit evidence. A JEA design needs both a role capability and registered session configuration. Add a protected transcript directory when command-level audit evidence is required. Question 8 of 36. After operators use a delegated JEA endpoint for several weeks, security needs to review exactly which commands were executed and by whom. Which single source provides the authoritative record of commands run through the JEA endpoint? Option A. Local administrators group membership changes on the target server. Option B. PowerShell operational logs filtered for the registered endpoint name plus JEA transcript files. Option C. Azure activity log entries for the server resource. Option D. Review Windows Security Event 4624 logon records for sessions created by the operators. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. PowerShell operational logs filtered for the registered endpoint name plus JEA transcript files. JEA writes command execution details to the PowerShell operational log with the endpoint identifier and can generate per-session transcripts that tie identity, time, and exact commands together. JEA audit trail lives in PowerShell operational logs and endpoint-specific transcripts, not group membership or Azure control plane logs. Question 9 of 36. A new Windows server must accept inbound SSH connections from Linux jump hosts for administrative tasks. Which single step installs and enables the required SSH server component? Option A. Install OpenSSH client and configure the SSH agent service for automatic startup. Option B. Install OpenSSH server and configure the SSHD service for manual startup. Option C. Install OpenSSH server, start the SSHD service, and enable the OpenSSH firewall rule. Option D. Install OpenSSH server, start SSHD, and enable the OpenSSH firewall rule on the Linux management jump host. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Install OpenSSH server, start the SSHD service, and enable the OpenSSH firewall rule. Inbound SSH requires the OpenSSH server feature, the SSHD service running, in the corresponding inbound firewall rule. The client feature alone cannot accept connections. Inbound SSH requires the OpenSSH server feature, a running SSHD service, and firewall reachability. Installing only the client satisfies none of those listener requirements. Question 10 of 36. An administrator account must authenticate to a Windows server exclusively via SSH public key authentication. Password logons must be disabled for that account. Which placement and configuration step enforces key-only authentication for the account? Option A. Copy the administrator's private key file into C users.profestrator SSH on the server. Option B. Add the public key to the account's profile folder as authorized keys.txt with default ACLs. Option C. Configure the account password to never expire and disable NTLM in the domain. Option D. Place the public key in C program data SSH administrators authorized keys with the required restrictive ACLs and enable public key authentication in SSHD config. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Place the public key in C program data SSH administrators authorized keys with the required restrictive ACLs and enable public key authentication in SSHD_config. For accounts in the Windows administrators group, the default OpenSSH configuration uses the shared administrators_authorized_keys file under program data. The file needs restrictive ACLs. Public key authentication must be enabled, and the private key remains only on the client. SSH key auth on Windows. Public key only in .sh/authorized_keys with tight ACLs, plus pub key authentication enabled in SSHD_config. Question 11 of 36. An SSHD config change to enforce a stricter cipher list must take effect for all new inbound SSH sessions without rebooting the server. Which single action applies the updated SSHD config to new connections? Option A. Validate the configuration with SSHD-T, then restart the SSHD service. Option B. Restart the WinRM service and rerun enable PS remoting. Option C. Change the PowerShell execution policy and restart the server. Option D. Edit the SSHD_config file and wait for the next group policy refresh cycle. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Validate the configuration with SSHD-T, then restart the SSHD service. SSHD reads its configuration only at service start. Validation with SSHD-T followed by restarting the SSHD service reloads the new settings for subsequent connections. SSHD config changes require SSHD-T validation plus SSHD service restart. WinRM, execution policy, or GP refresh do not reload it. Question 12 of 36. A mixed environment contains both Windows and Linux hosts. Some Linux hosts do not have WSMan/WinRM available and must be managed from a central Windows management station. Which transport choice enables PowerShell remoting to the Linux hosts that lack WSMan? Option A. Use the default WinRM/WSMan transport with Kerberos authentication. Option B. Register an SSH transport endpoint so PowerShell uses OpenSSH instead of WSMan. Option C. Enable CRED SSP delegation on every participating host. Option D. Install the Azure Arc Connected Machine agent on the Linux hosts. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Register an SSH transport endpoint so PowerShell uses OpenSSH instead of WSMan. PowerShell 7 Plus supports an SSH transport that allows invoke command and enter PS session over OpenSSH, bypassing the requirement for WSMan on the target. When WSMan is unavailable on Linux, register an SSH transport endpoint in PowerShell to enable remoting over OpenSSH. Question 13 of 36. An administrator must enable remote desktop access to a single production Windows server for a small operations team while minimizing exposure to the broader network. Which two configuration steps satisfy the requirement with the least additional attack surface? Option A. Enable remote desktop and enforce network-level authentication on the target server. Option B. Add a public IP address and open TCP 3389 inbound on the perimeter firewall for the server. Option C. Create a new domain group and grant it membership in domain admins. Option D. Allow the remote desktop firewall rule and add the operations team accounts to the local remote desktop users group. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A and D. Option A. Enable remote desktop and enforce network-level authentication on the target server. Option D. Allow the remote desktop firewall rule and add the operations team accounts to the local remote desktop users group. Enabling remote desktop with NLA plus allowing the built-in firewall rule and scoping logons to the local remote desktop users group provides authenticated, authorized access without broad network exposure or elevated domain rights. NLA requires credentials before a full session is established, and local group membership limits who can sign in. Bounded RDP access combines NLA, firewall reachability, and target-scoped logon rights. None of those controls replaces the other two authorization layers. Question 14 of 36. A help desk team needs RDP sign-in rights to a set of member servers without receiving domain-wide administrative privileges. Which action grants the required access while respecting least privilege? Option A. Add the help desk accounts to the domain admins group. Option B. Open TCP 3389 on every server firewall and rely on NLA alone. Option C. Add the help desk security group to the remote desktop users group on each target server. Option D. Assign the help desk group the Allow Logon through Remote Desktop Services right via a domain GPO that applies to all domain computers. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Add the help desk security group to the remote desktop users group on each target server. Membership in the local remote desktop users group on each target server grants the precise logon right needed for RDP, without domain admin privileges or global GPO side effects. The right is enforced per machine. RDP logon rights are granted by local remote desktop users group membership, or the specific user right on the target. Question 15 of 36. TCP port 3389 is open and reachable from the client, yet users receive an immediate logon failure before any desktop session begins. Which diagnostic step most directly explains the authorization failure? Option A. Verify that the remote desktop services service is running on the target. Option B. Confirm the client and server clocks are synchronized within 5 minutes. Option C. Check whether the server has a valid computer certificate for RDP. Option D. Review the target server's security event log for logon failures and inspect the remote desktop users group and any deny logon rights. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Review the target server's security event log for logon failures and inspect the remote desktop users group and any deny logon rights. When the port is reachable, the failure occurs at the authorization layer, NLA credential validation, user rights, allow or deny logon through remote desktop services, group membership, account status, or explicit deny policies. Event logs on the target record the exact rejection reason. Reachable RDP port isolates the problem to NLA, user rights, or deny policies recorded in target security logs. Question 16 of 36. Administrators must manage Azure-hosted Windows servers from the Azure portal without exposing public RDP endpoints. Which approach satisfies the portal-based requirement while eliminating public RDP exposure? Option A. Assign public IP addresses and restrict inbound RDP with network and Windows firewall source filters. Option B. Deploy Azure Bastion and connect to the VMs through the Azure portal Bastion host. Option C. Enable just enough administration, JEA endpoints, and require PowerShell remoting instead. Option D. Install Windows Admin Center on each VM and publish its HTTPS management endpoint. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Deploy Azure Bastion and connect to the VMs through the Azure portal Bastion host. Azure Bastion provides browser-based RDP SSH connectivity through the Azure control plane without assigning public IPs or opening inbound ports on the VMs themselves. The Bastion host handles the secure connection inside the Azure network. Azure Bastion provides portal-based RDP through private VM addressing, removing the need for public IPs or inbound RDP rules on each workload. Question 17 of 36. A small set of on-premises Windows servers must appear as manageable Azure resources without moving any workloads. Which single action onboards the servers as Azure Arc-enabled machines? Option A. Download and run the Azure Connected Machine Agent installation script with the target subscription, resource group, and region parameters. Option B. Migrate each server into an Azure VM using Azure Site Recovery. Option C. Register the servers as Microsoft Entra devices and assign Azure RBAC roles to the device objects. Option D. Install the Azure Monitor agent and enable Azure Automation DSC on each server. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Download and run the Azure Connected Machine Agent installation script with the target subscription, resource group, and region parameters. The Azure Connected Machine Agent, AZCM agent, projects the existing Windows server into Azure Resource Manager as an Arc-enabled server resource. The workload remains on-premises. Only the management projection is created in Azure. Azure Arc onboarding installs the Connected Machine Agent and creates an Azure Resource projection. It does not migrate or convert the underlying server workload. Question 18 of 36. Hundreds of Windows servers across multiple sites must be onboarded to Azure Arc without using interactive administrator credentials on every machine. Which deployment method meets the scale and least privilege requirements? Option A. Run the interactive Azure portal onboarding script once per server using a global administrator account. Option B. Generate an onboarding script that uses a least privileged service principal and deploy it via existing configuration management or group policy. Option C. Enable Azure Arc on the domain controllers and let automatic discovery onboard all member servers. Option D. Install the Azure Connected Machine Agent manually on a pilot server and image the rest from that template. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Generate an onboarding script that uses a least privileged service principal and deploy it via existing configuration management or group policy. At-scale Arc onboarding uses a service principal-based script or the Arc-enabled servers at-scale deployment methods. The script can be pushed through existing management tools without embedding interactive credentials. At-scale Arc onboarding uses a least privileged service principal through existing deployment tooling, avoiding repeated interactive administrator credentials on every server. Question 19 of 36. An Arc agent is installed on a Windows server, but the machine shows as disconnected in Azure due to an outbound proxy environment. Which actions most directly diagnose and resolve the Arc connectivity failure? Option A. Open inbound HTTPS ports on the server firewall and register a public endpoint. Option B. Reinstall the Azure Connected Machine Agent with default parameters. Option C. Validate required outbound HTTPS endpoints. Configure the proxy in AZCM agent. Verify TLS certificate trust, and run the AZCM agent network connectivity check. Option D, assign a public IP address and enable Azure Arc auto-discovery. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Validate required outbound HTTPS endpoints, configure the proxy in AZCM agent, verify TLS certificate trust, and run the AZCM agent network connectivity check. Arc uses outbound HTTPS to service endpoints. The agent proxy setting, certificate trust when TLS inspection is present, and AZCM agent connectivity diagnostics isolate the failure without introducing inbound exposure. Arc disconnected behind proxy is fixed by validating outbound HTTPS endpoints, AZCM agent proxy config, TLS trust, and running connectivity checks. Question 20 of 36. A decommissioned on-premises server must be removed from Azure Arc management while the physical hardware remains in the data center for other uses. Which sequence cleanly removes the Azure representation without leaving orphaned local configuration? Option A. Delete the Arc resource in Azure and immediately uninstall the agent. Option B. Uninstall the connected machine agent first, then delete the Azure resource. Option C. Run disconnect AZ connected machine and leave the agent installed for future reuse. Option D. Preserve required logs and associations. Run AZCM agent disconnect to remove the Azure relationship. Verify resource removal, and then uninstall the local agent. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Preserve required logs and associations. Run AZCM agent disconnect to remove the Azure relationship. Verify resource removal, and then uninstall the local agent. A clean decommission preserves required evidence, uses AZCM agent disconnect to remove the Azure relationship and clear connection state, verifies the resource is gone, and then removes agent software if the machine no longer needs Arc. Clean Arc decommissioning first coordinates Azure resource disconnection, preserves required logs and associations, then removes the local agent only after confirmation. Question 21 of 36. Security requires auditing whether password policies on Arc-enabled servers match the corporate baseline across the fleet. Which Azure capability provides the audit without requiring custom scripts on each server? Option A. Assign an Azure policy machine configuration definition at the subscription or resource group scope and review compliance results. Option B. Query each server via Azure Arc data collection rules for local security policy settings. Option C. Enable Azure Monitor guest OS metrics and create alerts on password-related counters. Option D. Use Azure Automation DSC to report configuration drift on a weekly schedule. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Assign an Azure policy machine configuration definition at the subscription or resource group scope and review compliance results. Machine configuration policies, guest configuration, deployed via Azure Policy, evaluate and report OS-level settings such as password policies across Arc machines at scale, surfacing compliance directly in the portal. Password policy drift audit on Arc servers uses Azure Policy machine configuration assignment at the correct scope with compliance review. Question 22 of 36. A supported guest configuration setting has drifted on several Arc-enabled servers and must be automatically remediated. Which policy configuration enables automatic correction of the drift? Option A. Assign an audit-only machine configuration definition and schedule more frequent compliance evaluations. Option B. Assign a supported machine configuration package in an apply and autocorrect mode and satisfy its identity, extension, and connectivity prerequisites. Option C. Enable automatic upgrades for the guest configuration extension and retain the existing audit assignment. Option D. Deploy a custom script extension that runs a corrective script on a recurring local timer. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Assign a supported machine configuration package in an apply and autocorrect mode and satisfy its identity, extension, and connectivity prerequisites. Machine configuration can correct supported drift when the assigned configuration uses an apply and autocorrect behavior, and the Arc machine satisfies the required identity, extension, and connectivity prerequisites. Audit-only assignments report drift but do not change it. Machine configuration corrects supported drift only when the assignment uses auto-correcting behavior and the Arc identity, extension, and connectivity prerequisites are healthy. Question 23 of 36. Production Arc servers are contained in a dedicated resource group, while development and test machines share the same subscription. The policy must affect production only. Which assignment technique limits the policy to the intended server set? Option A. Assign the policy at subscription scope with no exclusions. Option B. Embed the production server names inside the machine configuration package. Option C. Assign the policy to the production resource group and use supported exclusions or resource selectors where additional filtering is required. Option D. Assign the policy to every Arc machine and rely on local scripts to skip development and test servers. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Assign the policy to the production resource group and use supported exclusions or resource selectors where additional filtering is required. Azure Policy Assignment Scope should match the intended resource boundary. A production resource group provides a supported target, while not scopes and supported resource selectors refine applicability without embedding inventory into the configuration package. Target machine configuration through Azure Policy Scope, exclusions, and supported resource selectors. Keep server inventory out of the configuration package itself. Question 24 of 36. After onboarding an Arc-enabled server, a machine configuration policy assignment remains in not started state and never evaluates. Which sequence of checks identifies the root cause most efficiently? Option A. Re-onboard the server with a new resource group and reassign the policy. Option B. Verify only that the Arc agent service is running on the target server. Option C. Increase the policy evaluation interval in Azure Policy Settings. Option D. Confirm Arc agent and extension prerequisites, managed identity, network connectivity to policy endpoints, assignment applicability, and guest assignment status in the portal. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Confirm Arc agent and extension prerequisites, managed identity, network connectivity to policy endpoints, assignment applicability, and guest assignment status in the portal. Not started status typically indicates missing prerequisites, such as the guest configuration extension, identity, outbound connectivity to Azure Policy Services, or that the assignment does not apply to the resource. Systematic verification of each layer resolves the issue without unnecessary re-onboarding. A not started guest assignment requires checking Arc and extension readiness, managed identity, endpoint connectivity, policy applicability, and guest assignment status before re-onboarding. Question 25 of 36. An Arc-enabled Windows server must send performance and event data to Azure Monitor without using any native Azure VM agents. Which action enables the required data collection capability? Option A. Deploy the Azure Monitor agent extension via Arc and associate a data collection rule that targets the machine. Option B. Install the Log Analytics agent directly on the server and configure it with a workspace key. Option C. Enable the Azure Diagnostics extension through the Arc Machine Resource Blade. Option D. Run the Arc onboarding script with the -- monitor flag to auto-attach metrics. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Deploy the Azure Monitor agent extension via Arc and associate a data collection rule that targets the machine. The Azure Monitor Agent extension is the supported Arc extension for data collection on non-Azure machines. After deployment, bind a data collection rule, DCR, that defines what to collect and where to send it. Legacy log analytics agents and Azure VM-specific extensions are not the Arc-supported path. Arc-enabled servers require the Azure Monitor Agent extension, plus a bound data collection rule to enable performance and event data collection in Azure Monitor. Question 26 of 36. Security policy requires that only approved extensions may be deployed to Arc-enabled servers, while still allowing operational teams to install necessary extensions. Which two controls together enforce the least privilege extension policy at scale? Option A. Grant the operations team contributor at subscription scope for all extension operations. Option B. Configure extensions Prisnachny locally in the connected machine agent on each governed server through approved configuration tooling. Option C. Apply Azure policy and scoped RBAC controls that deny unapproved Arc extension resource types from the Azure control plane. Option D. Set NTFS permissions on the connected machine agent installation directory for the operations team. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are B and C. Option B. Configure extensions Delaneus list locally in the connected machine agent on each governed server through approved configuration tooling. Option C. Apply Azure policy and scoped RBAC controls that deny unapproved Arc extension resource types from the Azure control plane. The local Arc agent allow list is enforced per server and cannot be overridden from Azure. Azure policy and scoped RBAC add centralized control plane prevention and authorization. Together, they constrain both guest acceptance and Azure resource creation. Arc extension allow lists are enforced locally per server. Combine them with Azure policy and scoped RBAC to constrain control plane requests at scale. Question 27 of 36. An operations engineer must remove a previously installed extension from an Arc-enabled server without affecting the machine's Arc registration. Which action removes only the target extension while preserving the Arc connection? Option A. Delete the Arc machine resource in the Azure portal. Option B. Uninstall the extension binaries manually inside the guest operating system. Option C. Disable the Arc agent service on the target server. Option D. Delete the extension instance resource through the Arc machine extensions Blade or CLI. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Delete the extension instance resource through the Arc machine extensions Blade or CLI. Deleting the specific extension resource via the Arc extensions management surface removes the extension from the machine while leaving the Arc machine registration and other extensions intact. Deleting the machine resource or disabling the agent breaks Arc connectivity. To remove only one extension from an Arc-enabled server, delete its dedicated extension instance resource through the Arc portal or CLI without touching the parent machine registration. Question 28 of 36. An Arc VM extension shows provisioning failed status, even though the server reports connected in the Arc overview. Which diagnostic step most directly identifies the extension provisioning failure cause? Option A. Review the extension instance status details, handler logs, and protected settings errors in the Arc portal or CLI output. Option B. Rerun the Arc onboarding script on the target server to refresh all extensions. Option C. Review the connected machine agent heartbeat and AZCM agent show output for the server. Option D. Delete and recreate the entire Arc machine resource to reset extension state. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Review the extension instance status details, handler logs, and protected settings errors in the Arc portal or CLI output. Extension provisioning failures are reported in the specific extension resource status, handler logs, and error details. Arc connectivity alone does not guarantee successful extension deployment. The two are separate control plane and guest plane operations. When an Arc extension reports provisioning failure despite connected status, Inspect the specific extension instance status, handler logs, and protected settings errors for the root cause. Question 29 of 36. A security team wants to generate a report of missing security updates across all Azure and Arc-enabled Windows servers without installing any patches. Which Azure Update Manager action produces the required inventory report? Option A. Create a maintenance configuration and trigger an immediate deployment. Option B. Run an on-demand assessment or review the latest assessment results for the machine's scope. Option C. Enable automatic updates through Windows Update settings on each server. Option D. Deploy the update management solution from the Azure Marketplace. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Run an on-demand assessment or review the latest assessment results for the machine's scope. Azure Update Manager assessments evaluate and report missing updates without performing installation. A maintenance configuration with deployment actually installs updates. Assessment is the read-only inventory step. Azure Update Manager assessments generate an inventory of missing updates on Azure and Arc-enabled servers without performing any actual installation or deployment steps. Question 30 of 36. A production environment requires monthly patching of a dynamic group of servers inside a pre-approved maintenance window that recurs automatically. Which Update Manager configuration satisfies the recurring, scoped patching requirement? Option A. Run a one-time update deployment against a static list of server names. Option B. Schedule updates directly in each server's Windows Update settings. Option C. Create a maintenance configuration with a recurring schedule and associate or dynamically scope the target machines. Option D. Use Azure Automation to call the Update Manager REST API on a timer. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Create a maintenance configuration with a recurring schedule and associate or dynamically scope the target machines. A maintenance configuration defines the schedule, update classifications, and machine scope, static or dynamic. It enables recurring, governed patching without per-server client configuration or custom automation scripts. Recurring production patching with dynamic machine membership in Azure Update Manager is achieved by creating a maintenance configuration that defines schedule and scope. Question 31 of 36. A maintenance configuration must patch only servers that currently match dynamic resource properties, such as tags and location. Membership must update automatically when resource attributes change. Which approach ensures the maintenance configuration always targets the current matching set without manual list maintenance? Option A. Create a static list of server resource IDs and assign the list directly to the maintenance configuration schedule. Option B. Use Azure Policy to tag servers and run a one-time update deployment on the tagged group each month. Option C. Add every Arc-enabled server in the subscription to a single maintenance configuration without a scope query. Option D. Define a dynamic scope query on the maintenance configuration that filters by subscription, resource group, tags, location, and OS type. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Define a dynamic scope query on the maintenance configuration that filters by subscription, resource group, tags, location, and OS type. Dynamic scopes evaluate resource properties at schedule time and automatically adjust membership as attributes change, satisfying the requirement for property-based selection without static lists. Dynamic scope queries on maintenance configurations automatically select servers by current resource properties and adjust as attributes change. Question 32 of 36. An Arc-enabled Windows server appears healthy in Azure Arc, but is missing from Azure Update Manager assessments and scheduled patching. What is the most likely cause and first verification step? Option A. Verify Arc agent version, required extension installation, supported OS and region, assessment settings, and Update Manager connectivity status. Option B. Re-onboard the server to Azure Arc using a new service principal and delete the existing Arc resource. Option C. Enable automatic Windows Update policy on the server and trigger a local update scan. Option D. Assign the server to every maintenance configuration in the subscription to force assessment visibility. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Verify Arc agent version, required extension installation, supported OS and region, assessment settings, and Update Manager connectivity status. Arc connected status alone does not guarantee Update Manager readiness. Agent extension status, OS region support, assessment configuration, and connectivity must be validated separately. Arc connected status alone does not prove Update Manager readiness. Verify agent version, extension, OS and region support, assessment configuration, and connectivity. Question 33 of 36. A PowerShell runbook must manage only Azure resources, such as updating tags on virtual machines. No on-premises or private network resources are involved. Which execution environment and identity configuration satisfies the requirement with least privilege? Option A. Deploy a hybrid runbook worker on an on-premises server and assign it contributor rights at the subscription scope. Option B. Run the runbook in the Azure Sandbox using the Automation account managed identity with least privileged Azure RBAC roles. Option C. Use a hybrid runbook worker in the same VNet as the target resources and configure run as credentials with full owner rights. Option D. Execute the runbook locally from an administrator workstation using Azure PowerShell modules and a service principal. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Run the runbook in the Azure Sandbox using the Automation account managed identity with least privileged Azure RBAC roles. Azure resources are reachable from the Cloud Sandbox. The managed identity plus scoped RBAC provides the narrowest permission set without requiring hybrid infrastructure. Azure-only runbooks use the Sandbox with the Automation account managed identity and least privileged RBAC. Hybrid workers are not required. Question 34 of 36. A remediation script must restart a local Windows service that exists only inside an on-premises data center with no inbound Azure connectivity. Which placement and targeting configuration allows the runbook to reach the required service? Option A. Run the runbook in the Azure Sandbox and use an Azure Bastion connection to the data center service. Option B. Create a new automation account in the same region as the data center and assign a system-assigned managed identity. Option C. Install an extension-based hybrid runbook worker inside the data center network and target its worker group from the runbook. Option D. Use Azure Arc-enabled servers and deploy the runbook as a guest configuration remediation task. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Install an extension-based hybrid runbook worker inside the data center network and target its worker group from the runbook. Only a hybrid runbook worker placed inside the private network can reach local services. The worker group targeting directs execution to that environment. Private data center resources require an extension-based hybrid runbook worker inside the reachable network, with the runbook explicitly targeted to that worker group. Question 35 of 36. A runbook must restart one specific local service on a hybrid runbook worker and update one Azure resource. The principle of least privilege must be applied to both identities. Which two identity and permission assignments together satisfy the requirement? Option A. Configure hybrid worker credentials for the worker group using a dedicated local account permitted to restart the target service. Option B. Assign the Automation account managed identity the owner role at the subscription scope for all operations. Option C. Grant the local hybrid runbook worker account contributor rights on every Azure resource in the subscription. Option D. Grant the Automation account managed identity a custom role that permits only the required Azure resource update action. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A and D. Option A. Configure hybrid worker credentials for the worker group using a dedicated local account permitted to restart the target service. Option D. Grant the automation account managed identity a custom role that permits only the required Azure Resource Update action. Hybrid worker credentials provide a narrowly scoped local execution context for the service action. The automation account managed identity uses a minimal Azure RBAC role for the resource update, keeping local and Azure authorization separate. Separate the local worker identity for service restart from the automation managed identity with minimal Azure RBAC. Never combine broad roles. Question 36 of 36. A runbook job targeting a specific hybrid runbook worker group remains queued indefinitely and never transitions to running. What diagnostic sequence isolates the root cause before examining runbook script logic? Option A. Immediately increase the automation account fair share limits and redeploy the runbook with additional logging. Option B. Delete and recreate the hybrid runbook worker group and reassign every runbook to the new group. Option C. Verify that the runbook uses only cmdlets supported inside the Azure Sandbox environment. Option D. Check worker heartbeat and registration status, extension health, worker group targeting, job streams, and local service logs. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Check worker heartbeat and registration status, extension health, worker group targeting, job streams, and local service logs. Queued jobs indicate the worker never claimed the job. Worker registration, heartbeat, extension status, targeting, and local logs must be verified first. Queued hybrid jobs require confirming worker registration, heartbeat, extension status, worker group targeting, and local service logs before examining script changes. You finished the hybrid management deep dive. Sort any misses into 5 decision patterns: access path, identity boundary, Azure Arc resource projection, update lifecycle, or automation execution location. Replaying only the patterns you missed will turn this practice run into a precise remediation plan. Thanks for practicing with WebLizard CertLab. Keep the management plane, identity boundary, target scope, and execution location in view. Then continue with the Hyper-V and virtual machine management deep dive when you are ready.